I love Gilbert's Heartbreak Soup Love and Rocket stories. So, did you want to talk about the early?
Yeah, well, actually, what I want to do, Dave, is close out this episode by asking you 2 questions. And these 2 questions are questions that anyone who reads Love and Rockets must at one point ask themselves. And the first of those, are you nervous?
A little bit.
This is a surprise. The first of those 2 questions is Gilbert or Jaime? Who is your favorite? Who do you think is the best cartoonist? What is your answer, sir?
The thing is it's kind of unfair just because I haven't read a lot of like Jaime's early stuff, like the Maybe Mechanic stuff.
Yep.
So just because I've read all of the Palomar stories, the Luba stories, and I love them so much, despite this weird stuff that he's doing right now, I would say I'm a Gilbert fan, even though recently I preferred Jaime's work. I haven't read his earlier stuff, but I don't know. I still have an affection for Gilbert's early work, so I will say Gilbert.
So you're more of a fan of Gilbert.
Yeah, and you're a Jaime fan.
Well, I mean, for me, I find it almost an impossible question.
Yeah.
It's just like the most difficult.
I think you've definitely like said like one or the other.
I have.
But
well, I always feel like my favorite is whoever's work I last read. You know what I mean? Because I'll be like, oh, Jaime's my favorite, and then I'll read Gilbert's newest thing, and I'm like, oh man, there is no one like Gilbert Hernandez. Like, he is the best, Basically, I find it extraordinary that these 2 brothers have worked together under this same Love and Rockets banner for so many years, and they're both 2 of the greatest working cartoonists. Mm-hmm. If I was really pressed to the wall, if I had to choose, I would probably come down slightly in preference of Jaime. And I'm talking about the life's work of these 2. I'm not looking at the particular stories here.
Yeah.
I would probably slightly come down to Jaime just because his artwork is so beautifully simple, perfect. I feel like every line he puts down on paper is both gorgeous to just look at and also utterly necessary to tell his stories. There's not a wasted line in Jaime's work. He's kind of a perfect, pure cartoonist. But if Jaime Hernandez is my favorite living cartoonist, Gilbert Hernandez is my second favorite living cartoonist, and if you ask me tomorrow, that might be reversed. So bottom line, they are both. I mean, wouldn't you agree? They are both
obviously they're
top tier cartoonists. Absolutely phenomenal work. Well, okay, so the second question is a little bit easier, which is if we have anyone who's maybe not checked out Love and Rockets yet, because it's been running for so long, and both of the brothers have had long-running kind of continuities. Where would you advise someone to start with Love and Rockets?
Well, see, this was my problem a little bit with the Jaime stuff. Is because, at the beginning there's a lot of fantasy stuff interjected in it and it becomes something else later.
Yeah, Jaime's...
That's why I've kind of like put that out to the side a little bit.
Jaime's earlier stuff is not as strong as his later stuff, and it's also quite different in that he like Maggie's in his first comic. He begins the story of his long-running characters right away in the first issue of the first volume of Love and Rockets. But the world of Love and Rockets looks very different. It has a lot of science fiction fantasy elements intermingled with the more reality-based stories. Those fantasy elements drop away eventually, but they are there in the beginning, which can be kind of a stumbling block for some people.
Yeah, so I would say with Gilbert stuff, with the Heartbreak Soup graphic novel, that they've re-released these really nice-looking, new reader-friendly editions of Love and Rockets. And Heartbreak Soup is a great one to start with to get into the Palomar saga.
Yep.
So you get Luba, you get Palomar. What else do you need with it?
Yeah, so Heartbreak Soup would be a good introduction for the Gilbert work.
Mm-hmm.
But what about with Jaime?
Well, with Jaime, I kind of just jumped in with Ghost of Hoppers,
mm-hmm.
which I don't think is the best place to start actually, because it's, I don't know, it's returning to Hoppers with somebody who's already been there before. You know what I mean? It's
drawing on a lot of the history of
and,
the previous issues.
Yeah, and I'm sure if I'd read previous stuff, it would have been more impactful for me.
Yep.
So I'll leave this one to you actually.
Well, I think with Jaime Hernandez, you could pick up Love and Rockets New Stories number 4 that we reviewed here. Read it and get a lot out of it. You're probably not going to get as much out of it as someone who has read the entirety of Love and Rockets, but I think it would be good enough where you could fully enjoy it. Maybe in combination with Love and Rockets number 3. Love and Rockets number 3 and 4.
I think Love and Rockets number 3 would be a good place to start if you just want to read
Love and Rockets number
sampling.
3 and 4 is I think it's a high point in his career, so you'd be reading some of the best Jaime Hernandez comics out there. You might not get every single reference, but I think you can enjoy it as a complete story in and of itself. So you could start there. Personally, I would say, trust the kind of critics and the cultural consensus on this one, and maybe go ahead and jump back to the beginning with the Maggie the Mechanic softcover book that collects the very earliest Jaime stories. Yes, it is not quite representative of what Jaime's work would eventually become, but it is really good stuff. And it's where I began with Jaime Hernandez. I read later Gilbert stuff initially, but then I jumped back to the beginning with both brothers. So yeah, there's dinosaurs and superheroes, which is not representative of a lot of what Jaime would end up doing in those early issues. But Maggie's there, Hopi's there. A lot of the character work is there. Beautiful artwork that will become increasingly refined as the series goes along. So I would say, maybe check out Love and Rockets New Stories number 3 and 4, but I don't know that going back to the very beginning is necessarily the worst approach, especially since Fantagraphics has now collected it in these beautiful softcover volumes. So they've got a series collecting all of Jaime's work, series collecting all of Gilbert's work. So I would say go ahead and check out Maggie the Mechanic by Jaime Hernandez to get some of the early Love and Rockets stuff. I think it's good enough that you're going to want to read more, even though it might not be the best he's ever done.
Well, and obviously with Heartbreak Soup even, it gets better with the Blood of Palomar and Poison River and later stories.
Gilbert Hernandez hit the ground running a little bit more once he did the first Palomar story, although he took longer to get to Palomar. It wasn't in the first issue of Love and Rockets. But, so, yeah, but wherever you choose to start with Love and Rockets, you need to check out Love and Rockets. I mean, I don't think you are legally allowed to call yourself a comic book fan and not look at Love and Rockets at all. It's just indisputably one of the best comics ever. I mean, I have no qualms about saying that. It's just absolute top-notch work, and I'm just thrilled that we got to talk about it on this episode. I'm sorry if I talked a little bit too much about it, but I love it. It's fantastic.
They're used to it.
Yep, you guys are used to me rambling on. All right, there you go. Well,
all right. Thanks again for tuning into another Comics and More podcast. We'll see you next time.
All right, bye.